Disaster risk management for people with hearing impairment. Hello friends, I'm Sun. This film is dedicated to deaf people. Through this film, we would like to help you understand how to protect yourselves from the potential risks of natural disasters, such as storms, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, and landslides. First of all, we will discover what community-based disaster risk management is. CBDRM is the collective effort of all community members to reduce the impact of disasters. Why is CBDRM important to deaf people? Because they cannot hear early warnings from the village's loudspeakers. People in the community rarely communicate with deaf people, so they cannot deliver early warnings to them in a normal way. As a result, deaf people should attend CBDRM planning meetings with the community to bring out their difficulties and ask for suitable assistance solutions. Next, to help you understand more about community-based disaster risk management, we will go to a session on general knowledge. Part 1. General Knowledge. A natural hazard is a natural phenomenon that can be a potential threat to residents' health, safety, and property. There are many different kinds of natural hazards: storms, floods, landslides, earthquakes, and tsunamis. What is a disaster? A disaster is when a hazard occurs and causes serious damage to a community that cannot cope with its existing resources. Hazards and disasters are different. Whether a disaster occurs depends on the community's strength and weaknesses. We will discuss this in the next section. Part 2. VCA and CBDRM Planning, Vulnerability and Capacity Assessment, and Community-Based Disaster Risk Management Planning. Here are examples of strengths and weaknesses. Weakness. The evacuation path is small and has many potholes, causing difficulty for evacuation. Strength. The evacuation path is wide and has no potholes, easy to evacuate along. Weakness. The evacuation house is not accessible for people in wheelchairs. Strength. The evacuation house is accessible for people in wheelchairs. Weakness. Unstable houses with roofs that can easily be blown off by a storm. Strength. Stable houses that will not be affected by a storm. Weakness. Deaf people cannot hear early warnings from the village loudspeakers. Strengths. Deaf people can get early warnings from the public alarm lights, which are installed next to the village loudspeakers. Weakness. Deaf people cannot access information from other people. Therefore, they do not receive much support when a disaster occurs. Strength. Deaf people understand information from other people by them using body language, simple pictures, or written text. They are supported when a disaster occurs. In the previous session, we mentioned that if a community has more strengths than weaknesses, it will have less risk of disasters occurring, and vice versa. Now we will find out how to identify the strengths and weaknesses of deaf people by drawing a hazard map. We need to learn how to draw a hazard map. First of all, we find out which icons will be used on the hazard map. This is the icon for a mountain. This is the icon for a river or pond. This is the icon for a large or small road. This is the icon for a bridge. This is the icon for a rice field. This is the icon for a village hall. This is the icon for a pagoda. This is the icon for the house of someone who has difficulty accessing early warnings, for example, a deaf person or a person with poor hearing. This is the icon for the house of someone who has difficulties evacuating, for example, people with physical impairment or visual impairment. This is the icon for the house of someone who has difficulty in making the decision to evacuate. For example, people with mental or intellectual impairment. This is the icon for a strong house. This is the icon for a warning tool, such as a loudspeaker. This is the icon for a large tree. This is the icon for dangerous electrical wires. This is the icon for dangers that might affect people with disabilities when they are evacuating. This is the icon for an area affected by flooding. This is the icon for an area affected by storms. This is the icon for an area that cannot access early warnings from the village loudspeakers. This is the icon for an evacuation path. Step 1. First, mark the first group of these items on the base map. Mountains, rivers and ponds, roads, bridges, rice fields, village halls, pagodas, houses of people who have difficulty accessing early warnings, houses of people who have difficulty evacuating, houses of people who have difficulty in making the decision to evacuate, strong houses, loudspeakers, large trees. Step 2. Continue marking the second group of these items on the base map using colors. Areas that often get flooded. Areas often affected by storms or other disasters. Areas that cannot hear the early warnings from village loudspeakers. High-risk electrical wires. Step 3. Make a circle over the houses of people who will need assistance in early warnings and evacuations. If a deaf person has limited mobility for evacuating, then mark over his or her house. After that, draw evacuation roads from the houses needing evacuation assistance to the evacuation shelters. We have finished drawing the hazard map. Now we will move on to planning the steps to help people with disabilities, including deaf people, in response to a disaster. First, we will develop a priority list of early warnings. This list will contain the names of all those who have difficulty hearing the early warnings from a loudspeaker and will need special assistance. Next, we will develop a priority list for evacuation of those who cannot evacuate by themselves. Rescue teams or Village Disaster Risk Management Committee members will need to go to their houses to help them evacuate. Once we have finished the two lists, we will choose representatives to join the Village Disaster Risk Management Committee to present these lists and prioritize them in the village's lists. Here are some safety tips for disasters if they occur. Part 3. Safety tips for different hazards. Storms. You need to strengthen the house roofs and cut down large tree branches that are likely to fall and hurt you. Upon receiving an early warning of an approaching severe storm through your family members or village DRM committee, remember to charge your cell phone and board up all your windows and doors with plywood. If your house is not strong enough, follow the order to evacuate to a safer building. During a severe storm, stay inside a strong house